Hey, what's up everybody? Back with another how-to. Today we're going to be doing the rear brakes and rotors on this 2012 Hyundai Tucson, and this is going to fall in line with any second generation Tucson, which is 09 to 2015. So let's get into it now. Alright guys, first thing we got to do, get the wheel off. Lug nuts are a 21 mil, so let's go ahead and shoot these off. There we go. All right, wheels off. And the first thing I like to do with vehicles that are equipped with these bolts holding in the rotor is go ahead and get these off. So just to make it easier on ourselves, I'm going to hit it with the torch for a second just to give them a little heat to make it easy as possible for them to shoot out. And then we're going to go ahead and back them out. So let's go ahead and heat these up now, guys. All right, so we got them heated up. Let's go ahead and shoot them off. Right out. Right out, guys. So heat always makes it easier. All right guys, so we have our bolts on out of here now. So next move here is we're going to get our caliper bolts off. So these are a 14 mil. Should be able to use a 3/8 drive and a deep socket 14 and get these right off. You could also use a 14 mil wrench, whatever works, but 14 mil, let's go ahead and get those off. All right, so we have both of our 14 mils out. So now the caliper should be free. Go ahead and slide the caliper off. We're just going to let it rest over here for right now. Now we should be able to just pull these pads right out of the bracket. There's one. A little tighter, but two. All right, so we got the brake pads out. Now it's on to getting this bracket off. Now on a typical car, there's just two bolts holding this in, as there is with this, but the catch with these Hyundais and these Kias is the bracket bolt is hiding right behind this rear arm. So what we're gonna have to do is disconnect the strut to allow this arm bolt to fly out, and that way we have access to this bolt and we'll be able to then free up this bracket, get it off, and then we can get to the rotor. So we're gonna go ahead and approach the suspension, and then we'll get that disassembled in order to get this bracket off. So let's get into it now, guys. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is disconnect the shock. We have to get the lower mounting bolt off in order to move the shock back, and that would have then allowed this to free up and that bolt can shoot right out. So the lower shock bolt is a 19 mil along with the nut. So what I'm going to do is take a breaker bar with the 19 mil. We're going to put it on that side, and I have a 19 mil on the impact, and we're going to just blast that nut right off. All right, we got that nut right off. Now all we need to do is just knock that bolt straight out of the bottom of the shock. Now I just have a regular dead blow, won't damage anything. Give it a couple whacks. Got it almost out. Now I'm just going to finish it out with a punch. For a punch, we'll just use the dead blow. And she's out, guys. So we have our shock bolt and shock nut off. All right, so now since that shock bolt is out, that allows this to move. And as you can see, if we had this in position, we couldn't back this nut off. It would just hit the shock. So we have to disconnect the shock to make room for this bolt. All right, so now what we're gonna do is approach our arm the same way. I'm gonna go ahead and put this breaker bar on there, 19 mil as well, just like the shock, 19 mil nut. Let's go ahead and blast it off. Right off. All right. So we have that nut off of the arm bolt. And then we're just going to approach that bolt the same way. Take a dead blow. One that will not damage the bolt. We're going to knock it right out. Got most of it out. And I'm just going to take a punch and knock the bolt the rest of the way out. There it is, guys. So now what that allowed us to do is get room to knock this arm back. All right. All right. Now I'm going to take this arm, press it down underneath of that knuckle, and I got it around to get room. So now, let me grab some light. If you can see, there is our 14 mil bracket bolt that we had to do all that work to get to. So We have both of these bracket bolts exposed now, so let's go ahead and take a 14 mil and we'll get those bracket bolts out. All right, the bracket bolt is a 14 mil. I just took a 1/2 inch drive with a 14 deep socket. As you can see, we're working on that one that was hiding. So got both of these cracked loose. Let's just go ahead and back both of these out now, guys. All right, and once you got both of these 14 mils out, just be careful because the bracket is now loose. We can go ahead, lift the bracket off. Now we have full access to this rotor and we can actually get it off since the bracket's now off. So let's go ahead and get this rotor off now. All right, so we did take the bolts out already, as you know, which are the ones holding it in. Now, it's a good chance this rotor's still going to be on there solid as a rock because it's rusted onto the hub. So there's a couple different ways you can go about getting these off. In my opinion, I think the easiest way is just taking a dead blow, a rubber one that is not going to damage anything. Even if you miss, if you hit a wheel stud or anything, it's not going to damage anything. But if you give it a few hard blows right here, even if you need to, you can give it a few hard blows, spin it, hit it in another spot, spin it, and it should break up. There it is, guys. A few whacks and she's free. All right, so as you can see, we got the rotor off. Everything is exposed. The suspension is still disassembled. So now we are ready for the reassembly. So I'm just gonna take a little bit of brake cleaner here. Spray all that off since it is pretty gross and corroded in there. All right, got that cleaned up a bit. Now let's go ahead and grab the rotor and we'll slide that on. All right, so it's time for the rotor reassembly. Now got our new rotor here. Just make sure you put your rubber grommet right there into the new rotor. Doing this one-handed there, but make sure you also have your holes lined up for your bolts to go in. So that will be our next move here, is I'm gonna go ahead and get these started in there. Just take them as, start finger threading them in. And this will just give us good stability on the rotor for when we're reinstalling everything. Now I'm gonna go ahead and fire these back in until I get one click on them. So let's go ahead and shoot these back in with the impact. All right, one. Got a little bit of spinach there. Locked in, guys. So we got both of those bolts locked in. So let's go ahead and get this bracket back on. All right, guys. So we're gonna go ahead and get our bracket back on. Now, I'm choosing to reuse the shims that are already on here just because they seem really tight. You know, I like how they are. They're OEM. They're fitted perfect. They're not compromised. So I want to go ahead and reuse those, but I cleaned this up with brake cleaner. I sprayed the whole bracket, including the shims, down and gave it a little wipe down with brake cleaner. So we're going to go ahead and get these started back up, these 14 mils. So all I'm doing is starting the 14 mils in the bracket. All right, got that top one in there. I would suggest starting with the top one to make it easier to get that stupid lower one aligned. Let's go ahead and get this lower one in now. The one we did all that work for. All right, guys, got that started. So let's go ahead and torque these bolts to spec. All right, guys, so we're gonna go ahead and torque these 14 mils for the bracket back in. They are 43 foot-pounds, okay? So we're gonna torque these at 43 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and lock these in now. There it is, guys. Torqued in 43, so we got our bracket back on. Both 14 mils are torqued in. Now we can go ahead and put our suspension back together. All right, so we got those 14 mils back in. Next thing we're gonna do is get this arm back into position. We're gonna work on getting it aligned and getting the bolt back in. So we have it pushed underneath of the knuckle here now. Just press it back into place. Now, probably gonna need to take a mallet to persuade it to go back up because she's not going to go back up in there easily. So let's give it a few whacks. All right, it's just about aligned. So now let's go ahead and see if we can work our bolt back into here. All right, now that we got our arm pretty much knocked back into place, this can definitely be a pain in the ass to align, so what you need to do is try to force the bolt in the other way. There you go. Just to try to help get yourself aligned. Now you might need to take a screwdriver and help you guide this in, but the bolt is going in this way, so go ahead and slide it in. Got it going. I'm just using that screwdriver to help guide it all the way through. All right, so that's just about in there. All right, so as you can see, that's just about in here now. Still not fully in there, and it might, you know, take a little hump to get it back over this, but we're gonna do a little trick here to help send that thing home. So if you look right here, there's a hole where I can use this 3/8 breaker bar almost as a punch. I have it up against that bolt, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit it a few times right here and help force that thing in. So let's go ahead, hit this a few times to help send that bolt in, and then we should have that bolt through that arm, guys. All right, guys, so you don't want to go crazy. I'm just going to give it some light blows here. It's starting to come through, as you can see. There it is. Pretty much all the way in there. Yep, it is. Got it all the way pulled through, guys. So what we're going to do now, thread our nut right back on the end of that. I'm going to loosely tighten that 19mm nut back on with the impact. All right. We're just going to leave that, you know, semi-torqued right now. We're actually going to torque it to spec in a second. What we're going to do is go ahead and get our shock back aligned, get that bolt in, lightly tighten, and then we're going to torque both of those bolts to spec. So let's go ahead and we'll get that lower shock bolt in. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and approach this lower shock mount, get that bolt back in there. Now this one might be a tad bit trickier. You're probably going to need to get a jack involved. So I have a small jack. What I'm going to do is catch it right here at the bottom of that control arm, and I'm going to start pressing it back up into place. As you can see, goal is just to get it aligned pretty close. That looks pretty good right there. So let's go ahead and do the same thing we did on the other side. Just try to force our bolt in this way. Yep. All right, so looks like we're aligned. Now we just have to go put it back in the correct way. So let's come from this side here. Alright guys, I got it started. As you saw, I used the screwdriver method to help maneuver it in. A couple of dead blow whacks. Just about through. All the way through, guys. So, literally jacked it up, aligned it, came over to this side, used my screwdriver to help force it through, and now both of these are back in the correct OEM orientation. And we're going to go ahead and throw our nut back on here. I'm going to lightly shoot that on with the impact. Remember, it's a 19. All right. Now I'm going to let that jack tension off. Okay. Get that jack out of there. Now that is fully reassembled, and the only thing we need to do now is torque both of these bolts to spec. So let's do that now. All right, so as you saw, we got our lower shock mount nut back on. We got this arm nut back on. Both of these are 19 mils, and both of them are 115 foot-pounds for the torque spec. So I'm going to do the same thing I did when I started. I'm going to take this breaker bar, hold that side, get our torque wrench on the nut, and we're going to go ahead and get this thing torqued in to 115 foot-pounds. All right, so we got our arm torqued in at 115. Let's go ahead and do our shock one. It's the same thing, 19 mil, 115 pounds. Same method. Going to take our breaker bar, put it on the back. You're probably going to need an extension to get to this with a torque wrench, but Got our extension on, and we're going to go ahead and torque this to 115 foot-pounds. All right. Lower shock bolt and nut also locked in, 115 foot-pounds. So we got both of these torqued to 115 foot-pounds. Our suspension is back together. Now we can get back to the job we were trying to do and get these brakes done. So let's go ahead and get these pads in and finish this job up. All right, so before we get the pads back in and get this reassembled, we do need to retract the piston because it is obviously out farther from the old pads, and we need to push it back in order to have the space for the new thick pads. So take one of the old pads, put it in there. I have the C-clamp as centered as possible on the back bolt right here for the brake hose, centered in the pad, and all we're going to do is go ahead and take the C-clamp, twist it up until we get our caliper piston completely retracted. So let's go ahead and retract this piston, guys. There we go, guys. Just get it till it, can't go anymore. You don't have to force it. Just till you get it a little bit tight, should be good. So we're gonna go ahead and back this off, get this pad off, and then we can go ahead and reassemble the brakes. All right, so now that we have the piston completely retracted on our caliper, we're gonna go ahead and get our pads into the bracket. So I have a little bit of pad grease. We're gonna put a little bit on the ends where our pads contact the shims, okay? You don't need to go crazy with this stuff, just get a little bit on there to help prevent any squealing and make it easy to slide in. Keep in mind the one in the rear is with the wear sensor, so go ahead and get this thing dropped in. Bang. Got that popped in there. So let's go ahead and do the front one now. Same deal. A little bit of pad grease, both sides. Rub that in there lightly. Go ahead and pop this guy in there. Bang. All right, so both of our pads are now in there. So what we're going to do now is make sure our caliper can slide on over our pads. So we're going to do the same thing with this caliper. We're going to take a little bit of grease, put it on the inside part here, and then just go around the piston with it. All right. Just a little bit, don't gotta go crazy. And we should be able to take our brake caliper just like this and slide it right over our new pads. So we pretty much have this all reassembled. All we gotta do now is put our brake caliper bolts into the bracket that hold it on, and then we can torque them to spec, and then we are done, guys. So let's go ahead and get these started. These are our 14 mil brake caliper bolts, so I'm just finger tighten them in. All right, got them pretty tight now. So let's go ahead and get these torqued to spec. All right, guys, so we're going to torque our 14 mil caliper bolts in. Now these are 23 foot-pounds, so not too tight. Let's go ahead and just get those locked in. One. Here it is, guys. Both of them locked in, 23 foot-pounds. You can see we got full play. Make sure before you put your caliper back on that these do have play and that your bracket does have movement in these. So everything is good, guys. We are fully reassembled here. So I hope this helps you with your Tucson and your brake pad replacement. Not the funnest job, but with a little bit of persistence, patience, there's really no reason you can't knock this out with the right tools and a little bit of know-how. So hope this helps, guys, and until next time.